Alright, to clarify this HMI, let's just forget for a moment this is HMI is down here. We'll say we've got a start button and a stop button, and these start and stop buttons have lights in them. So obviously these are inputs as buttons and outputs as lamps. So it's an input and an output together, and that's just that the switch is one item and the lamp is another. So you would hook those up as inputs and outputs. Well, obviously if you had this conveyor over here, the goal would be to press the start. The conveyor would come on and stay latched and would move until you hit stop. But anytime the conveyor is running, you're going to have the green lamp on, and anytime the conveyor is not running, you would have the red lamp on. So that's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. So that's really the first step in this HMI project, is writing a program that does that, given the parameters that I've given you. And of course the other output would be the conveyor itself, and in your parameters that uses a couple of outputs being on simultaneously. So that's your first task. Well, let's say that the operator that normally interfaces from this has to sometimes work on the other side of this machine, and you don't want to have to hardwire another start stop on the other side. Well, you can use an HMI. Well, with an HMI, we can add virtual buttons, just like we can add real buttons. So we'll add a virtual start. I'm just going to let that be a green circle. And we can add a, whoops, I didn't mean to turn that red. So let's go back and add a green circle. We can add a virtual start. And we can add a virtual stop here. Now, I'm not going to try to line them up like you really would in the real world, because you would want this to look neat. But I'm also going to add a virtual, a virtual lamp here. So here's our, let's make that square. Let's make our lamp square so we can distinguish. So here's our virtual stop lamp. And let's come down here and add our virtual start lamp. So that should be green, so let me fix that real quick. There we go. So these are lamps. These are virtual push buttons. Now, when you think about it, all of this is real. These are real lights, real push buttons. All of this is virtual. And in order for these virtual buttons to interact with this real-world PLC, let's draw a PLC out here. So that's the PLC. We know these buttons and lamps have to be hardwired to the PLC, as does the conveyor motor here. Well, we've got to modify our program to allow for these virtual buttons. Now, these virtual buttons are nothing more than a signal being sent to the PLC. So they're going to use a status bit address. And if you remember from your data tables, your status bit addresses are the B3 file area. Now, these lamp indicators here are going to look at the data table for outputs. So they're going to go look at the output data table, which is the letter O, and the corresponding real-world address for these output lamps, not the buttons, the lamps. And they're going to do that. So what you're going to have to do first is create, well, first you're going to have to write the program to make this work. Your conveyor turn on when you press start, the green lamp to be on anytime the conveyor is running, conveyor to turn off when you press stop, and conveyor to the lamp to turn red when you're stopped. And all that's easy in the real world PLC. So once we get this real world setup going, we want to incorporate this, and as I said, these are virtual buttons, file B3 area, and whatever address you want to give them. These are outputs that will look at the same data table outputs that the real world outputs function on, and we'll take care of that. So what we've got to do is the outputs are going to come on. This HMI is going to look at that data table. But in order for the inputs to function, we've got to add those to our real world PLC, because in the real world, let's just say, let's give this an address. Let's say this is I colon 0/0. It's going to be looking for I colon 0/0 to start the conveyor, right? Well, it's got to look for this one, this virtual B3 address, to start this conveyor. And the same with the stop. So without giving too much more away, that's basically it. So it kind of goes in 3 steps. Step 1, write the program that makes this work. Step 2, write an HMI program that has virtual buttons for start and stop, virtual outputs for start and stop lamps, and then incorporate the two together as the 3rd step. So that's pretty much it.